Welcome back to this very special Indianomics with former Reserve Bank of India Governor Dr. Subbarao. Dr. Subbarao, thank you very much for your patience and for waiting on. Like I told you before the break, the big question for me is, should we worry about this capital deficit a bit too much? In the past, usually, for instance, even when you were steering the ship at Reserve Bank, we had an attack on the rupee because we had a high current account deficit. But now this is, clearly a capital account deficit. Is this something worrisome, especially because we are entering a very fragmented and fractious world?
Well, that's an important distinction you're pointing out, that, during 2012 to 13, we had a taper tantrums. We had, that was driven, as you say, the rupee depreciation or rupee crash was driven by a current account deficit, whereas now it's being driven by capital flows. But, if you dig deep, you'll find that capital flows have been the culprit every time.
Okay.
Go back to 12-13, for example. We had a high fiscal deficit. That spilled over. We had a high current account deficit, about 4%, in fact, beyond 4%. Actually, current account deficit should be self-adjusting. The exchange rate should move to adjust for a high current account deficit and bring it back in line. That did not happen that time because of capital flows. Remember, there was quantitative easing around the world. Capital flowed in. So we enjoyed, if that's the word to use, we had a high current account deficit because capital flowed in. And when the Federal Reserve said that there's going to be a taper, emerging economies, currencies, including the rupee, got jolted and capital surged up. So even the 2013 episode, to some extent, is a consequence of volatile capital flows. And today, of course, is because of the dollar getting strong. So managing the capital flows has in fact been a challenge for all emerging economies, particularly for India. And the only way to do that is to maintain a war chest of reserves which inspire market confidence, and also, I would add, minimize your intervention.
Okay, yeah, that's important. Perhaps allow the market to function a little more. Let me get another theoretical question as well. A few months back, there was a lot of discussion that the Reserve Bank should not be targeting food inflation because interest rates have no bearing on food inflation. That, the CEA raised the argument that they should only look at non-food inflation or core inflation. Is that argument still valid?
I don't agree with that argument, Latha.
Okay.
For the reason that food is a large component of the consumption basket of at least 800 to 900 million people in the country. It's food prices they see in the market every day. It's food inflation that they experience. For the Reserve Bank of India to abandon food inflation and target an esoteric number unrelated to people's everyday lives would be, I think, RBI would risk losing credibility. Yes, you're raising a point about food inflation not being amenable to control by monetary policy because food demand is inelastic. That argument, I think, would be valid if food inflation is a one-off, but not if food inflation is a trend that's happened in our country. In fact, I think the Reserve Bank itself has said somewhere that food inflation is our core inflation. So I don't believe it is advisable for the Reserve Bank to target some number like core inflation, hiving off food inflation. The argument about growth, we went through that earlier in this conversation. I don't think it hurts growth in the long term. In the short term, there might be some sacrifice, but that's an inevitable cost to pay for price stability.
Okay. No, to some extent, the word flexible inflation targeting has given the Reserve Bank a lot of elbow room, and they have used it, one will have to admit, extremely admirably, and not been too pig-headed about that 4% number. Time permitting, I'll come back to the inflation targeting framework itself. But, you've held many positions other than only finance. Of course, you've been finance secretary, but you've also been in the States. So I want to ask you a broader question of this conflict between center and states. We are seeing almost a north-south cleavage in India today. Southern states are feeling penalized because they controlled population earlier, because they invested in education and development. Now there is this additional language issue, and much more important, the delimitation issue, which, you know, the southern states feel will erode their political economy power even more. Now, where is all this leading? Is this something we should worry about and it can become ugly?
Latha, since you've raised all the concerns, let me put some positive spin on this, which is that if you look around the world, you'll find that every large federal country has had problems about interregional imbalances, interregional tensions. You know, Canada had a Quebec separation moment. Spain had a Catalonia independence moment. Nigeria and Ethiopia are roiled by ethnic tensions. East Timor, importantly, separated from Indonesia because of anger over sharing of resources. By those standards, I believe we have managed our federalism quite well. So I want to preface my response with that. Having said that, yes, all the fault lines you pointed out are emerging. You know, southern states feel that they're being penalized for their development, that they're having to pay a price. For example, today, for every rupee that richer states like Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra contribute to the national tax pool, they get back less than a rupee. And for every rupee poorer states like UP and Bihar contribute, they get back more than a rupee. Now, this sort of cross-subsidization is inevitable, even desirable to some extent in any federation. But the question southern states are asking is, are we going beyond reasonable limits? To what extent do we cross-subsidize or support poorer states? Are we being penalized for our good performance? On top of this is the question of language that you pointed out. There's the question of the central government not acknowledging or much less reckoning with the diversity of the country. So southern states feel left out or orphaned, and I think it needs much more than political leadership. It needs statesmanship to solve this problem, because southern states are worried that they will have to continue to bear the cost of faster development even as they lose their political clout. Yeah, because the Home Minister has given an assurance that southern states' seats are not going to come down, but I've not seen any statement saying that they will not lose in relative terms.
Yeah.
It's equivalent. If UP and Bihar get more seats, it's a relative loss for the South.
We have run out of time today. Thank you very much, Dr. Subbarao, for sparing time for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Latha.
Well, that's it on this very special edition of Indianomics. Thank you very much for watching.